literary theory began to influence literary criticism after 1970s. It came to India, I think, after 1980s. I did my MA during 1983-85, and when I studied, we never had any topic in our syllabus on literary theory. Our syllabus of literary criticism ended with F.R. Lewis, from Aristotle to F.R. Lewis. That was the syllabus that we studied. But that was in 1983-85. But even at that time, we listened to certain lectures by some professors from outside as well as within India on deconstruction, on structuralism, post-structuralism, etc. So that was in the air at that time, but not included in the syllabus. And so my topic, my lecture will be limited to that period, before theory. I used to speak about one of my students, a research scholar, who did her MA and MPhil before 1990 in the University of Kerala, Institute of English, and she left India, joined a college, an institution in Dubai, and she came back after 10 years, that is in about 2000, in the early 2000. And when she came back, she wanted to do research, and she approached me. So at that time, I think by that 10 years time, 1990 to 2000, lot of changes occurred in the syllabus of PG programs, not only in the syllabus, but in the literary scenario of Kerala and India. And what happened was that this research scholar was not able to understand even little bit of theory because she has no exposure to theory. So she couldn't find out a topic for research. Initially, she has to work for 1 or 2 years to cope up with the gap. So the 10 years time between 1990 or the last part of 1980s and 2000 was a transition period as far as literary studies in India is concerned. So it transformed the whole approach of literary criticism, so-called literary criticism. Now we use the term literary theory. And because of this sudden transition, I think lot of people found themselves outdated because they could not cope up with the changes. They were indifferent to theory. They were very much against theory because they found that theory introduces a new way of looking at literature which is totally different from the traditional way of looking at literature. I think in the beginning, even Dr. Ajayakumar was very much a critic of theory, even though he also developed his own theory later. Antarsannivesham is supposed to be a theory developed by Dr. Ajayakumar. So he was familiar with a lot of theoreticians, but even then, in the initial stages, he was highly critical of theory. Even now, theory is being criticized, post-theory, and many such developments are there. So we find that this is a particular phase in literary criticism or approach to literary criticism that existed for a long period and continues even now to a certain extent. So I think we should have academic interest in studying theory. We can object to it, we can oppose it, at the same time we should learn it, we should understand it. And what is theory before theory? That is what we have to look into. You know that the Western literary criticism, the history of Western literary criticism begins with Aristotle. But when we look at Aristotle, Longinus, and Johnson and Dryden, the Romantic critics, the Victorian critics, Matthew Arnold, then the 20th century critics like F.R. Lewis, T.S. Eliot and others, we find that the whole tradition of literary theory or literary criticism before the emergence of literary theory is often termed as liberal humanist phase or liberal humanism. But that does not mean that all these theories are same or similar. They are not similar. They are very different. Aristotle's approach was different from Longinus' approach. Wordsworth's approach was different from Coleridge's approach. Matthew Arnold's approach was different from T.S. Eliot's. So they are totally different from one another, but there is a similarity, or there is something that is common. And it is because of this common factor that they are termed as liberal humanist theory or liberal humanism. Liberal humanism is considered to be the theory before theory. And what is common in liberal humanism? We know that Aristotle believed in focusing on the spectator or the reader, because he speaks about pity and fear and catharsis, and all these ideas, pity and fear, catharsis, all these are connected with the spectator. What it creates in the mind of the spectator. It creates pity, it creates fear, and it purgates the reader or the spectator of his pent-up emotions. So it is, in one sense, a reader-centered approach that Aristotle develops. Whereas Longinus is different. He speaks about the sublimity. It is focused on the author. So the reader-centered and the author-centered approaches were there in the ancient times itself, in the beginning itself. So critical approaches were very different. And like that, Wordsworth and Coleridge were totally different in their approach, even though both of them were romantics. Both of them are considered to be romantic critics. But Coleridge's Biographia Literaria was a criticism of Wordsworth's ideas, Wordsworth's approach to literature. And so similarly, we find that these theories are totally different from one another, but at the same time, there is something common. And what is common is a kind of belief in a belief in something that is permanent. That is, these critics believed that a work of art becomes great because of its permanence, because of the fact that these works contain ideas that are relevant for all time, ideas that are relevant for all periods, all occasions. For example, they focused on permanent values. In Malayalam it is called Sanadana Karma. Sanadana values, permanent values. What are permanent values? For example, if you take Mahabharata, it is considered to be a work which speaks about the conflict between dharma and adharma. So the conflict between dharma and adharma is considered to be something that is permanent. That is not limited to first century, second century, third century, fourth century or 15th century, 16th century, etc. It is present in all ages. That is sanadana. That is permanent. So permanent values were considered to be one touchstone for analyzing, assessing the greatness of a work of art. If that work contains such a permanent value, or if if it deals with such a permanent value, that work of art is considered to be great. Love is considered to be a permanent value. And similar, truth is such a permanent value. So, work of arts which deals with permanent values, that is considered to be great. As far as most of these theorists are concerned, or critics are concerned, they were searching for such values. It is true that the literary criticism of that period actually tried to unearth such values which makes this work of art great. So all the epics deal with such permanent values. And we know that the criticism of the past always tried to analyze the greatness of the work. Samuel Johnson was trying to analyze the poets, in the lives of poets. He was trying to analyze the poets and their work, their life as well as their works, to unearth what is hidden within the work, the ideas that are hidden within the text or within the poems. So we find that most of these critics, and Dryden was trying to compare the British poets with the classical poets. Comparison of British poets with the classical poets. So he introduced comparative criticism. And so in all these works, commonly speaking, we can find this tendency to identify what is permanent, what is enduring, the enduring values in literature. What endures, what remains forever. And that is considered to be a kind of criteria for the greatness of the work. At the same time, we find that there were critics like Coleridge who tried to identify the importance of a kind of rational approach in literature. Even in Coleridge, we cannot find a kind of theorist who tries to analyze literary works in connection with the historical or the social and cultural aspects of life. So Coleridge was to a great extent a kind of person who tried to argue that literature is not very much connected with the author. The author is not so important, just as Wordsworth speaks about. Wordsworth, as you have learned, as you have studied, Wordsworth speaks about the emotion recollected in tranquility, and Wordsworth's theories are very much focused on the author. The author's personality, the author's emotions and feelings are at the center in Wordsworth's theories. But in Coleridge it is not like that. He rejected that view. Anyway, we find that these theories or these approaches of criticism that came before literary theory tried to assess the merit of the text based on permanent values. And Matthew Arnold tried to compare contemporary literature with classical literature, just as Dryden did. Matthew Arnold developed touchstone method. I hope you are familiar with that idea, touchstone method. That is comparing and assessing the merit of a contemporary writer or contemporary writing, connecting it with a classical writer, a great writer. So we find that in all these works there is a tendency to assess a writer and his work and his merit based on certain values that are considered to be permanent, certain values that are considered to be static. And the classical writing was considered to be the norm. Whereas in Wordsworth there is a deviation from that. Wordsworth tried to introduce a new way of looking at literature, and he argued against the so-called poetic diction, which is very much artificial. The kind of artificial poetic diction that is used by poets. And he wanted to use the real words used by ordinary people in the day-to-day life. Anyway, so by and large we can say that the theory before theory, or the literary criticism before theory, tried to focus on permanent values. So for example, take a novel like Old Man and the Sea. This is the example that we usually give to students to introduce the approaches before theory. Old Man and the Sea is a famous novel, American novel, and we find that this particular novel, even though it is very small, it is considered to be a classic novel, where, as the title suggests, there is an old man who goes to the sea, and he continues to go for many days, for more than 80 days, but he could not get any fish. But he continued, even though he didn't get any fish, he continued to go. And finally, at last, he got a fish, and he brought it to the shore with great difficulty. But when he brought this fish to the shore, he found that the flesh is almost gone. Only the skeleton remains. Only the skeleton remains. So this particular novel is considered to be a novel that deals with the perseverance, continuous effort that is needed in human life. The perseverance. We shall not be offended by failures. We should continue to try and try and try. And finally we will succeed. That is considered to be one of the meanings of this novel. So this novel, when we approach it from a traditional angle, whether practical criticism of I.A. Richards or close reading, or from the point of view of the earlier critics, we will try to identify what is at the center of this novel. What is hidden in that novel? What is the hidden meaning of that novel? What is the permanent value that is present in that novel? And what is the value that we find perseverance is considered to be one of the values that the novel speaks about. And it is also interpreted in many different ways. And another interpretation of the novel is that this novel speaks about man's search for truth. Man's life is a long journey. Life is considered to be a long journey. So in many literary works, life is presented as a journey. Life is a long journey. And that journey is a journey for finding out the truth. A journey to understand truth. So the sea is an image of what? Eternity. Sea is often considered to be an image of eternity or time. It is considered to be an image of time. So the old man is rowing his boat through this eternity in search of truth. And what is the truth that he gets? He couldn't find truth. He continues, he again and again goes to the sea for truth, and finally he got the truth. But what is the condition of the truth that he got finally? It is only a skeleton. It is only a skeleton. He gets only a skeleton. That means, what is the idea? We cannot understand truth in its entirety. Truths can be attained only in parts, or we can get only a flash of truth. There are many works with similar meanings. Sri Aurobindo wrote a poem. He wrote many poems related to this. And in one of his poems, he speaks about this idea that we won't be able to attain truth or the meaning. It appears in a flash. It appears in a flash and disappears all on a sudden. So truth is unattainable. And life is a journey towards truth. Life is a journey that tries to find out truth, in search of truth. So there is a poem by Nessim Ezekiel that you have studied, Enterprise. Yes. In that poem, Nessim Ezekiel also speaks about the same idea, enterprise. It depicts a journey of a group of people which began with great enthusiasm, but after some time, several people they keep away from that journey, and only very few continues their journey, and even they were fed up with that journey, and finally when they reached their destination, they didn't understand why they started the journey. And that is the poem. So that poem also considers life as a journey and the meaninglessness of life. That is what Ezekiel tries to project in that poem. Meaninglessness of life. So because Ezekiel has such a kind of approach towards life, towards everything, he is highly ironical. He is dissatisfied with his existence in India. So his dissatisfaction is evident in that point. So he finds life as a meaningless exercise. Life is a meaningless exercise. So this is the kind of traditional approach that we make towards words. We identify the permanent values that are depicted in the text, in the work. And if it presents such a permanent value, that work of art is great. It is considered to be great. It is considered to be of some value. And so the traditional approach, I told you, the traditional approaches are not the same. They are very different. Aristotle is different from Longinus. Wordsworth is different from Coleridge. Johnson is different from Dryden. And Matthew Arnold is different from T.S. Eliot, and F.R. Lewis is different from Emerson. So everybody is different. They have different approaches, but there are certain common factors. The way they assess the text, the work of art, has some similarity. They tried to focus on the text, and it is more evident in the 20th century when I.A. Richards came up with something called practical criticism. Practical criticism. You might have studied that, practical criticism. Or it is also termed as new criticism. The American version of practical criticism is new criticism. So in both, what we find is a focus on the text. If Dryden tried to compare the British author with classical author, in practical criticism there is no such comparison. There is no such comparison. If Wordsworth tried to connect the text or the poem with the author, emotion recollected in tranquility. The author's emotions and feelings are unburdened in the form of poem. That is what Wordsworth says. That is, the author's emotions and feelings are poured into the poem. So that is what Wordsworth says. But that is actually rejected by practical criticism. Practical critics do not want any such interference from the author or the history or the context, history or the other writers or the classical writers or any other element outside the text. They wanted to focus on the text itself. So text is the core. We don't have to look at anything outside the text. And that is what practical critics tried to find out. You know about the story behind the development of practical criticism. But what is important is that in practical criticism, they tried to analyze or deduce meaning out of the text without connecting the text with the author or the context. Neither the author nor the context is important, only the text is important. So, practical criticism was focusing on the text, and this textual criticism or new criticism was very popular at that time. Even now it is popular, because even in contemporary criticism there is an element of practical criticism, or there is an element of close reading. Close reading is one of the techniques used in contemporary literary theory as well. But at the same time it had its own weaknesses. So new criticism or practical criticism comes just before the emergence of theory. And so we have to think that literary theory to a certain extent was a result of it is a kind of a reaction to the traditional kind of criticism, including practical criticism. You also studied T.S. Eliot and his theories, and T.S. Eliot, as you know, in his study on metaphysical poets, he developed a concept called dissociation of sensibility and unification of sensibility. You studied that. And then impersonality theory is also a contribution of T.S. Eliot, objective, correlative. All these are Eliot's theories. Anyway, Eliot as well as I.A. Richards and many others, F.R. Lewis, they tried to focus on the text as well. That means their criticism, even though that was totally different, they had their own approaches. All these critics tried to focus on the text itself. And then the theory, when the theory began, we find that theory tried to focus on certain things that are outside the text. Or we can say structuralism, post-structuralism, and many other theories that came after the 1970s, in the 80s and 90s. These theories revolutionized the study of literary texts, and the literary studies or literary criticism or literary approaches became more sociological, more political, and more culture-oriented than before. Earlier it was text-oriented, now it became more political and cultural and sociological rather than merely focusing on the text. And that is the difference that we find in the approaches. But we find that meanwhile, we will have to consider another important theory that came long before the modern approaches like structuralism, post-structuralism came. That is Marxism. Marxism actually is a kind of a bridge between traditional approach and the modern approach. Because Marxist approach can also be considered as a theoretical approach. It is the predecessor of contemporary theoretical approaches. And in all theories like structuralism, post-structuralism, etc., there is an undercurrent of Marxism. Marxism remains as an undercurrent because it was Marxism that tried to argue about the sociological relevance of a text. You know that even in Malayalam literature there were several such literary discussions and debates on the approaches to literary texts. Mara and Mundasheri, the kind of conflict between Mara and Mundasheri is certainly reflective of this conflict, whether the text is important or the context is important. And there were many such debates about the social relevance of the text and whether a text has to be studied merely as a text or whether we have to consider the social, cultural relevance of the text, etc. There were many such debates. Those who follow Malayalam literature, Malayalam literary criticism, can understand that there were several such debates in Malayalam as well, just as in other world literature as well. So Marxism can be considered as a bridge between traditional approaches to literature and the modern approach to literature. It would be right to say that modern criticism like structuralism, post-structuralism are Marxist approaches. They are not Marxist approaches, but they are highly influenced by Marxism. Highly influenced by Marxism. So this brings us to the idea that literary approaches can be very, very different from what it was in the past. In the past, we tried to look at what is hidden in the text, what is the inner meaning of the text, by looking at the permanent values, what is the kind of value that is hidden within the text. Whereas in the contemporary approaches, we find that the critics are trying to untie the text. That means they are trying to dissect the text into small, small pieces. And they are not looking for permanent values. They are trying to looking at the value of each experience. Or I think now what is important is the little narratives, the experiences of ordinary people in a particular area rather than the experience of the whole humanity. That means, for example, an autobiographical novel like Karukku by Bama, which is considered to be a Dalit text, it does not create or it does not present a universally valid theme. It does not present something that is universal in relevance. There are certain things that are commonly applicable to all parts of the world. But at the same time, it speaks about a particular group of people in a particular area, in a particular region, and not about the whole humanity. So, an autobiographical novel like Karukku speaks about an experience that is specific to a particular region and particular people. And that is considered to be very relevant now. The specific experience, the particular experience, or we can call it little narrative. Why little narrative? Little narratives are narratives that refers to the experience of a particular group of people in a particular area. That means which is applicable to a small group. So little narratives rather than the grand narratives, the broad experience which is common to all kinds of people, love, hatred, the conflict between truth and falsehood. These are all grand narratives that we find in epics. But these kinds of texts present the little narratives. So now the contemporary criticism focuses on such experiences because it is much against the kind of hegemony of the grand narratives. Because in grand narratives, what we find is the experiences of the upper sections of the society or the mainstream of the society. Whereas contemporary criticism tries to prefer the people and the experiences that are outside the mainstream. Outside the mainstream means the marginalized people, marginalized experiences. That is considered to be relevant, more important. So we find such a kind of transition in focus as far as contemporary theory is concerned. And so English studies actually promotes in contemporary time in all syllabus, in most of the universities we find that the syllabus promotes contemporary approaches to literature, looking at literature from very different angle from that we had earlier in the 1970s or before 1970s. I told you in the beginning that we, people like me and Hari Krishna, we studied during the 1980s, early 1980s, and at that time there were no theory. We studied pure British literature. British literature was the major chunk of the whole syllabus. Little bit of American literature was there, and we can never think of learning a Malayalam novel in the syllabus of English language and literature. But now Malayalam literature, regional literature are all part of English language and literature. And at that time, the texts prescribed for general study were full of British authors, A.G. Gardner, F.R. Lewis, and Bertrand Russell, and many such authors. Only very few Indian authors were present, and few were either Jawaharlal Nehru or Mahatma Gandhi. There were no other Indian authors. But now we find that the text for general study contains a lot of Indian authors. There is a difference in approach, because at that time we were following the typical British kind of literature, and we considered that as the ideal one or the only relevant one, because Indian writers are not considered to be important authors, even though R.K. Narayan, Murtalan, and many other writers became popular at that time. But they were not considered to be as important to be included in the syllabus. And then, more than that, we find that English studies focused more on creating an awareness about British literature rather than about literature in general, or creating an approach to literature in general. And those teachers who teach English literature, they also try to focus more on British literature and British authors and their autobiographical details and many others, rather than any regional literature. But we know that those English teachers like Ajayakumar, for example, Ayyappa Panikar and Vishnu Narayan Namburi, they became famous poets in Malayalam. That is also a fact. So, in Malayalam literature, major contribution was given by English teachers. A lot of English teachers contributed much in Malayalam literature as poets, as critics, and as in various other forms. That is true. But at the same time, English literature was totally detached from regional writing at that time. And that is changed now. Now the contemporary syllabus contains all kinds of writings, Canadian writing, new writings, African writings, Indian writing, and regional literature, etc., etc. So that is a difference in approach that was created by theory. So theory has influenced our life. And theory, I think, need not be taken as something that is apart from our life, that something that is detached from our life. It is very much connected with our life, because we find a lot of changes happening in our society itself. For example, the kind of social status that is given to transgenders in the past. What about transgenders? Transgenders were treated as something or somebody, some kind of a group that is antisocial for a long period. They were not treated at par with the so-called normal people. They were considered to be abnormal. But now that approach has changed. Now they are given preference. And even this year we gave special admission to students from transgender community, creating a new seat. We gave admission to such applicants in different colleges. So that means the society is changing its approach. So the kind of difference in approach certainly is created by certain kind of debates and discussions that were part of theory as well. Not only literary theory, social, political theory. So theory has its own influence in our life. The word theory itself states that theory is something that it is a group of ideas, set of ideas that are detached from life, but it is not like that. Theory has a lot of relevance in our life, day-to-day life experiences as well. And that is evident in the contemporary life, in the approaches of even institutions like a university to different people. So we find that it is certainly a kind of relevant set of ideas that has its roots in the real life experiences. We will have to approach theory as something that is very much relevant to contemporary life. We cannot study theory detached from our life. So it has to be associated with our own experiences, our own life, even though that is very difficult. But it is true. And we find that a study of theory is not just for assessing or analyzing a literary text. It is not just for analyzing or writing a criticism on a film or on a novel or on a painting or anything like that, but it is also for understanding ourselves, where we are, what is our position in various issues, what should be our response, etc. Because we have seen that many political leaders especially, they commit mistakes while commenting on certain issues, is it not? I don't want to name any particular person, but certain political leaders make certain comments about women, for example, suggesting that women are good for nothing, or they are very weak, or certain comments that refers to the concept of a woman, the concept of a male about a woman. What is the general concept of a male about a woman? That woman is weak, woman is less intelligent, and woman cannot rise up to the status of a man. And that is a kind of attitude that men usually have. So certain comments made by certain people, either political leaders or others, that reflect this kind of an approach. And a lot of people criticize them, and finally they will have to withdraw their statement, etc. So why this happens? It is very much connected with theory or our understanding of life. So these leaders, political leaders or individuals, make such comments. Even ordinary people make several such comments. I have listened to several such comments about many people, and these comments originate from their own understanding, their own perspective about life, about other people, about various social groups, etc. And there are several terms in our own language, in Malayalam itself. There are several terms that are used by Suresh Gopi and many others in films, which is highly derogatory. That means which speaks very, very badly about certain particular groups of people. And the dialogue is not written by Suresh Gopi, dialogue is written by some others, and the actors are actually presenting it on screen. So the dialogue writer as well as the actor and the people who enjoy that kind of dialogue shows that their perspective is a kind of patriarchal or traditional kind of perspective. So you have several opportunities to analyze even ordinary comments made by people in day-to-day life. Ordinary comments made by people in your own experience, you can find out what is the kind of comment. So we find that in our own home, you will find that if there is a girl and a boy, the girl is often asked to go to the kitchen and bring tea or do something related to that, whereas the boy is never asked to do that in many houses. Is it not true? The majority of the girls are sitting here, they will know that. So why is this? You can ask your mother why your son is not allowed to make tea, or you are not calling your son. I am similar to him, so there is no difference as far as the status is concerned. According to the Indian Constitution, everybody is equal. So why this difference? You can ask your mother. So that question is highly theoretical in nature. So what I am trying to say is that theory is not something that is detached from life. It is very much connected with our life. We have to study theory, connecting it with our own personal day-to-day experience as well. This is not just a tool or a mechanism to write papers. Earlier, many years before, one professor told me that, a woman professor told me that, what is the use of feminism? Feminism can be used to write papers on various women authors, etc. That means that doesn't have any relevance in life, because in practice she might have felt that in her real life feminism do not work at home. It is used just for writing papers. But that is not very much true, because these theories are very much connected with our day-to-day life, real life experiences. That is the importance of theory. So earlier, literary criticism was considered to be something that is related just to the study of literature or art or things like that. It is a kind of an idealistic practice, identifying the hidden meaning somewhere within the text. That was the purpose of literary criticism. But literary theory or theory as far as concerned, it is not just literary theory. Literary is a kind of term an adjective that we use. But it is not just literary. Theory is not just literary. It is also used in literature, study of literature, that is all. So theory as such is not such an idealistic practice. It is a practice that is very much connected with our day-to-day life, real life experiences. So you can use theory in everything, in the study of every aspect of your life. Even this conference, you look at the construction of this conference room, where there is a podium and the spectators or the listeners are sitting at a low level, whereas the speaker is standing at a very high level. So the difference in the status of the speaker and the listener is very evident in the architectural design of this particular hall, Senate chamber. So why this? Because the architect or the people who made this hall believe that the speaker is always superior. Speaker is always superior, and the listeners are inferior to them. So you can read theory even in this Senate chamber, in the construction of the Senate chamber itself. So that is the relevance of theory. So I just wanted to give you an introduction on what happened before theory and how theory emerged. Very erudite speakers are ready for their presentation, so I don't want to stand in between them. So I would like to thank Dr. Lal and the School of Distance Education for giving me this opportunity, and I formally inaugurate this seminar, one day student seminar as well, and I hope that more seminars of this sort will happen in the days to come. Thank you very much.